Howdy y'all, grab yourselves a beer, it's time to talk Path of Exile. I wanted to put together a quick video that talks about some of the maths involved in map rolling. This is not something that is necessary to watch unless you have an interest in the details, the nitty-gritty of how things work and some of the little tricks that you can use to maximize your potential when rolling. But if you don't want to watch the whole video, the too long didn't watch version is that 8 mod maps are better than you think they are, and the Bloodlines mod is better than you think it is on maps, and is actually worth as much as at least an entire additional mod when you've got it. Anyways, one thing that you can notice, if you have a look at the selection of map mods that can roll, and this is an article that's posted on the Path of Exile wiki, a little bit of exploring will tell you that the pack size that's added by a particular mod uniquely determines both the increased item quantity and the increased item rarity that that map will have on it. So you can see here that all of the 4% pack size mods will add 6% rarity and 10% quantity. All of the 5% will add 8 and 13 and so on. The maths of that is pretty simple. It's the rarity is 1.5 times the pack size rounded up, and no one really cares about this stat for reasons I'll get into. And the increased item quantity, which is the important stat, is 3 times the pack size minus 2%. Anyways, I wanted to define a little number which I'll call the juice factor of a map. 10,000 is the default, and so that's what you get for a white map. And this is as simple as 100 plus the pack size modifiers times 100 plus the increased item quantity modifiers. So if we have a look at this map that someone is selling at the moment, this Cruel Panorama Ashen Wood map, you'll see that the increased item quantity is 98% and the pack size is 138%. So on this map, the baseline juice factor for this map is 198 times 138. Now, I don't expect that you can calculate that in your head, but you know, there are some tricks to do that. You can round each of the numbers up, so 138 is close to 140, 198 is close to 200. You can multiply those in your head to get 28,000, and then you can just subtract a couple of hundred for each point that you rounded up. So in this case, you'd say minus 200 for each point that you rounded up. You rounded up a total of 4 points, 138 to 140. 198 to 200. So 4 points that you've rounded up, you then can subtract 4 times 200. That'll give you a pretty good estimate. That'll give you an estimate of 27,200. And the exact number, which you can check in a calculator, is 27,324. But you don't need to do that level of mental arithmetic. Just have a broad estimate in your mind and you'll be all right. Now, you don't necessarily need to completely calculate this, but it is something that's just a useful figure to give you a sense as to how many maps in one this map will feel like running. So for this map, it's, as I said, I calculated it and found it to be 27,000 juice factor. That means that it's roughly equivalent to running 2.7 white maps. So if you took 2.7 white Ashen Wood maps and you were to run them, you'd get pretty much the same loot from both maps. Oh, sorry, from both setups, either from running this map or from running the 2.7 white maps. Now, Bloodlines and Nemesis mods add to this, and you'll notice that this map has neither of those. So you've got balance, you've got vulnerability, you've got unwavering, you've got insulation, that's unwavering again, you've got burning, you've got titans again, endurance, and unstoppable. So that's the mods that are included on this map. Neither of them are Bloodlines or Nemesis. If we look down here, the next map that's available on this trade indexer is the Hatevine Primordial Pool, and that also has exactly the same quantity and pack size, and that's deliberate because I've just done a search for maps that have 38% pack size or more in order to guarantee that I'd find some pretty juicy 8 mod maps. And this has 27% more magic monsters. Some players have done a bit of testing, and also there's some information that's come from Grinding Gear Games posts. And it's generally estimated that 12% of mobs in a map are magic, and 1 in 80 of them are rare. I'm just going to assume that this is true. I don't actually know for certain that it is, but I'm going to assume that the people that did that testing were right. Now, magic monsters have 700% increased item drops. And so this means that they drop a massive 42.6% of all drops that you get in Path of Exile come from that 12% of monsters that are magic. And this is one of the reasons that people say, always kill magic monsters. You know, if you look at any guide that's written for the new player, it will always stress, you need to kill the magic monsters. The rare monsters you can skip, the white monsters you can skip, but the magic monsters will be your bread and butter. They'll be how you get experience points, because they have a massive boost to XP. I believe it's plus 350%. And they also have the massive boost to loot. So increasing magic monsters by 20 to 30%, as this mod does, in the case of Hatevine Primordial Pool, it's a 27% increase. This is a large multiplier to the amount of loot on the map. If it's at 20, if you've rolled 20% on Bloodlines, then it adds 8.5% to all drops, and if you've rolled 30%, it adds 13% to all drops. And this multiplies with everything else you've got that might be providing more loot to your maps. So this is a big, big factor. And then this is also coupled with the fact that the magic monsters have a chance to drop better maps than regular monsters can drop. You know, they can drop 1 tier higher than the zone you're currently in. So for this reason, the Bloodlines mod is extremely good. I just assume that it's about the average, that it's, you know, I don't factor in whether it's 20% or 30%. I just add 10% to the juice factor of a map in the event that it happens to have the Bloodlines mod on it. Nemesis is nowhere near as good. You'll see the Nemesis mod will come up scanning down here. We might have one. If not, you've certainly will have seen it yourself if you've run a few hundred maps. And yeah, nothing seems to be immediately jumping out with it. But the Nemesis mod adds 20 to 30% more rare monsters, and also has the difficulty side of it. So that's the bonus side. The difficulty side is that all rare monsters in the map have a guaranteed Nemesis mod. This doesn't add nearly as much to your value, and I just approximate it as by adding 2% to the juice factor of the map. I'm going to define a second and much less important term as well. So we've got that's the juice factor, which is your 100 plus your pack size modifiers, times 100 plus your item quantity modifiers, plus a further 10% if the mod has Bloodlines, and a further 2% if the mod has Nemesis. The unique juice factor, which has 1 million as the default, unfortunately the numbers do get quite large here, is an estimate as to how many unique rings and extremely good uniques, like, you know, things like Cossaday, drops like Impulse's Broken Heart. They're very powerful unique items that sell for a lot of currency. Because these scale not just with the increased item quantity and increased pack size statistics on a map, but they also scale somewhat in a complicated fashion with increased item rarity. And so less is known about how item rarity works in the community, and I'm just going to make the assumption, this is quite possibly completely wrong, that the IIR stat on a map is a flat linear increase to the amount of unique items that you would get. So what that means is that in the time that you would get 100 unique item drops, if you have 50% increased item rarity, and you ran exactly the same content, your expected number would be 150 unique item drops. This stat is believed to have diminishing returns, and again, this is not really well understood, and is why, and also uniques aren't that critical to the amount of wealth that you accumulate in Path of Exile. It's also not known whether increased item rarity increases your chance to get Shaper or Elder items, And as far as I can tell, there has been no statistically significant sampling that's been done on this question. This is potentially interesting because Shaper and Elder base items always drop as rare, but we don't know as a community whether it's first determined, okay, an item has dropped, firstly roll, is it going to be Shaper or Elder against a certain probability, and then once the answer is set to yes, the rarity of the item is just determined, oh, okay, that's a rare, nothing further needs to be done. Or alternately, it might be a chance, percentage chance for every rare item that drops. We flat out don't know on this, and again, that's something that someone could do some serious testing on. I've got some statistical ideas as to how you would do that, but it's just a lot of work. In any case, I've not modeled Bloodlines or Nemesis, but they have an even bigger effect here than they would on the normal juice factor case. So, for instance, Bloodlines, because magic monsters have a sizable bonus, as well as having 700% more normal item drops than any other monster, they also have a considerable buff to the rarity of the items it drops. Again, this is not very well understood, and I've not really tried to model it at all. But to take Cruel Panorama, your juice factor, as we said before, is 27,324. Your unique juice factor is a 198 for quantity, times 159 for rarity, times 138 for monster pack size. There is no way you're going to be able to calculate that in your head, although if you've got a bit of a maths background, you might be able to eyeball it as being somewhere around, between 4 and 4.5. But with a calculator, I've determined it's 4.344. And that indicates, 4,344,516, which indicates that you get basically the same amount of uniques for running this as you would if you ran 4.344 normal Ashenwood maps. So let's just call that 4 1/3. If you ran 3 of this map, you could expect to get the same amount of uniques as you'd get for running 13 white maps. Again, there's a lot of assumptions behind that, so there's a lot more is known about the standard juice factor than the unique juice factor. I want to add in here that the way that these interact with the Zana bonus, you'll know that when you run a map, depending on how far you are through Zana's storyline, you'll get a bonus between 1% if the only map you've ever run is Zana's first map, up to 8% if you've completed the Uber Elder quest line entirely. This is actually pretty significant. It will add at least 100% at least 100 per point to your juice factor. And so it's something that really should be a priority in a league, to at least get that up to 7 by doing as much of Zana's quest chain as you can do quickly, because it will make a big impact on the amount of loot that you get in basically every time that you interact with the Atlas of Worlds content and maps. So the important part of this, and the reason that I defined all of these new terms, is to look at the sort of loot you can expect from running a bunch of typical map states. So I'm going to look at white maps, I'm going to look at transmute and go, I'm going to look at transmute, augment and go, I'm going to look at alch and go, I'm going to look at 8-mod maps, 8-mod chiseled maps, and 8-mod chiseled maps where one of the mods is Bloodlines, to give you a sense of the relative worth of these maps. I'm going to assume, and if we look at the list of map mods, the average of the map mods is very close to 5% per, there's a few that are 4%, there's a few that are 5%, and there's a smaller number, very small number that are 6 or 7%. I'm going to make a not totally correct assumption that the average map mod is 5% pack size, which will then entail it being 13% on the increased item quantity. Now, if you run I'm also going to make the assumption that you have 6% to your Zana mod. That's just for consistency and to give you a sense of how important that is comparatively across the entire suite of maps that we consider. So if you take a white map, your juice factor is 10,600. If you take a chiseled white map, and I don't recommend running white maps that are being chiseled, but if you do it, your juice factor will be 12,600. That's because you've got a quantity of 20%, 0 pack size, and then just your 6% from Zana, so it's 100 times 26. If you transmute and go on a map, so this means you just take an orb of transmutation, whack it on your map, and then you don't pay any attention to what you get, you don't augment it out if it's only got one affix on it, you will get an average of 1.5 mods. So you'll have sometimes you'll have one prefix, sometimes you'll have one suffix, sometimes you'll have one of each, a prefix and a suffix. And I believe there's a general, at least a general belief in the community that you will average 1.5 mods. In any case, I'm going to assume that's correct. And in that case, your average item, or your average pack size modifier is 7.5%. So 107.5 times 125.5 is approximately 13,400. You'll notice here that transmute and go is actually more lucrative than whacking 4 chisels on a white map and then running it. And that's why I said you should not be chiseling maps unless you're intending to really juice them up. You just won't get the returns on them. If you transmute a map and then you augment it, then you have a look at it, and if it is one mod, you augment it, then you will end up with an average of 10% pack size, so 110, times an average of 32% increased item quantity, so times 132, for 14,520. You'll notice that this 2-mod map is considerably more lucrative than the transmute and go approach, which gave 13,400. There's a big jump up there, and as a result, I would suggest that you always run your maps, even very early in a league when you're really struggling. You know, maybe you're using absolute dumpster tier gear. You will find that you'll make considerably faster progress if you're running at least 2 mod maps when you're just starting out in the white map section of the Atlas of Worlds. This will be 14,520. So this basically bonus 45% loot over what you would get at a baseline will help you find the resist gear that you're missing. It will help you find the additional damage that you need in order to then survive in maps that have been hit with an alchemy orb. Now, when you use an alchemy orb on a map, you will get 4, 5, or 6 mods, and these are not equal. These are not equal chances. A fair amount of testing has been done on this, and there was a bit of discussion on Reddit about it recently. It seems like 4 mods comes up 2/3 of the time, 5 mods comes up 1/4 of the time, and 6 mods only comes up 1/12 of the time. Now, it will be clear that this is not, these tests were not done on maps, they were done on a low item level iron ring, but someone did do a test with 4,000 chaos orbs on them, and I believe that using a chaos orb on a already rare item is completely identical to using an alchemy orb on a white item. In any case, with 4 mods, the average juice rating is 18,960. With 5 mods, it is 21,375. And with 6 mods, it is 23,920. And again, that makes the same assumption of 5% pack size, 13% increased item quantity for each of these mods. If we take a weighted average of these, and we use the assumption that you, as I said, that you get 8 4-mod maps for every 3 5-mod maps and for every 1 6-mod map, then your Elk and Go on average will be 19,977 juice factor. You'll notice that compared to the 10,600 that you got for running a white map, you're basically, when you Elk and Go a map, you're getting basically twice the loot. Now, this is an enormous increase in speed, because I think the vast majority of builds, even when you're really struggling, even when you're really undergeared at the start of a league, you will be able to methodically clear a rare map considerably faster than you could clear 2 white maps. So even if we disregard the cost of maps, it's pretty much always right to use an alchemy orb on your maps, except the very, very start when you're just really struggling and there's a lot of mods that you can't do in combination with each other, at which point, yeah, you transmute, you augment, and you go. Now, when you use a Exile on a map, there's a 25% chance, we believe, for that map to go to become an 8 mod map. And some examples of 8 mod maps would come up in this search here that I'm running, where I'm just showing maps that have got 38% or higher pack size. 38% is impossible to roll on a 6 mod map. Now, when you have a map that, when you have an 8 mod map, if it wasn't chiseled, because you can't chisel it once it's been made 8 mod, once it's been Exiled, your average pack size is going to be 140%. Your average item quantity bonus is going to be 110%. And multiplying those together, so 140 times 100 plus 110, so 140 times 210 gives you 29,400. If that map was chiseled before it was Exiled, you're instead looking at 140 times 230 for a massive 32,200. That is more than 3 times the return you will expect from a white map. And then if we want to really increase this, sometimes you will be lucky and you will have a map that has the Bloodlines mod on it. And I believe the second mod here, this Hatevine Primordial Pool map, is a good example of that. 27% more magic monsters. This adds considerably to the more to the map, because those magic monsters stack multiplicatively with everything else. And if you get Bloodlines at 20%, this will increase the map juice factor up to 34,266 on average. And if it has a 30% Bloodlines, this will be as high as 35,623. So with the 27% Bloodlines, you would be expecting something slightly less than that. You'll notice that this means that if you can complete those maps at all, you will be absolutely showered in loot. And it's one of the reasons that players end up tightening their loot filter as their character becomes more and more powerful. The last thing that I want to add in is that this has an interaction with the Atlas of Worlds bonus. For the more completion of the Atlas of Worlds you get, the more that your average map tier of drops will increase. The exact mechanics of that bonus are that for each percent of Atlas bonus you get, which is currently capped at the time of recording this video, is capped at 159%, you have a 1% chance for any map that you get to upgrade a tier. So if a map would drop a tier 6 map, and your Atlas bonus is 83%, you have an 83% chance to get a tier 7 instead of that tier 6, and a 17% chance for it to stay a tier 6. If you have a bonus that exceeds 100%, instead all of your maps are increased by 1 tier, and then there is a percentage chance for them to be upgraded once further. So if you've got an Atlas bonus of 141%, and you would get a tier 10 map drop, it will be tier 11 for sure, and it has a 41% chance of being further upgraded to a tier 12. These increases cannot exceed the maximum level of map that monster could drop. So if you kill a white monster, then a monster that is not magic and is not rare, then its maximum map tier drop is a refund, so the same tier that you're in at the moment. If you kill a magic or rare monster, the maximum you can get is a +1, so 1 tier higher than the current map you're in. And if you kill the map boss, the maximum you can get is a +2. So we don't understand as a community the precise map drop rates. So the chance that you get a tier 7 map, or the chance you get a tier 8 map. We have a few things that we suspect as a community. There seems to be a bias towards higher tier maps. So for instance, if you're running a tier 13 map, and you kill a white monster, which can drop anything from tier 1 to tier 13, it seems to be, although it sucks when you do get a tier 3 map drop from that, and it's pretty memorable when it happens, it's pretty rare. Most of the maps that will drop will be tier 9 or above. So there seems to be a bias towards the higher tiers. However, the higher up in tier you get, the more of these lower tiers there are. And even though each individual low tier doesn't have a very high chance of dropping, so you know, when you're running a tier 13, there's not much chance of getting a tier 6 drop, there's not much chance of getting a tier 5 or a tier 4. These start to add up, and it becomes harder to sustain your tier 13s. And, you know, than it would be, say, to sustain tier 11s. And each point of the Atlas bonus adds considerably to the amount of... it adds considerably to your chance of sustaining maps over time. Each point matters, and I'm trying to work on a mathematical model at the moment to define a map drop juice factor. At which point I could say that, you know, by you could then experimentally determine by running a large number of, say, tier 10 maps, what map drop juice factor you need in order to, over the long term, sustain tier 10 maps. And I'm expecting this, once this is finished, which is going to be a while, I'm expecting that each point of your Atlas bonus will contribute somewhere from 60 to 100 points to this map juice factor. So if I determine via testing in the future that you need 23,000 map juice factor in order to sustain tier 10, so that means that if you run 100 tier 10 maps, you would expect to get an average of 100 returns. Then if I determine in the future that that requires maybe 23,000 to be your average map juice factor, then you'd be able to make that either by running quite difficult maps, many of them being 8 modders, and having a very low Atlas bonus, or alternately, you might just be able to do it by transmuting and then augmenting your maps if you have a very high Atlas bonus. So if your Atlas bonus is a full 159, then that's going to contribute, depending on how the modeling works, it might contribute 9,000, it might contribute 12,000 to your map return juice factor. And then if it turns out that 23,000 is the figure that you need, you may just be able to get by perfectly fine by transmute and go, or transmute and augment and go, and then be swimming in maps. So you wind up continually getting in more maps than you need. Ultimately, tier 16 maps, to sustain them without ever falling back to tier 14 and 15, does require that you pretty much put in everything that you possibly can, and potentially that you may also need to val your tier 15 drops, and some of which will become tier 16s. Anyways, that's some definition of terms that I intend to use if I do go ahead with making the map drop mathematical model, which is currently already looking like quite a mess, and is going to require a lot of data in order to calibrate it. If you're interested in helping with that, and you'd be keen to run perhaps 1,000, or say perhaps 100 or 1,000 of a specific high tier of map, and take detailed notes, just let me know in the YouTube comments, and I'll get in touch with you via Reddit or some other means, and discuss exactly the statistical methods that I have in mind and how we'd go about working them out. Anyways, that's all for this video. Thanks for your time.